My name is Vivian Tran, and I'm an admissions and recruitment manager at UBC Sauder. So thank you all for joining us today from near and far. Just as an icebreaker, maybe those of you that are joining us today can, in the chat, just enter where you're from, like a city or country, just so we can see where everyone's joining us from. It's always kind of an icebreaker to see where everyone's coming from. As you do that, I want to note that the event is being recorded. The recording might be used in some marketing pieces by UBC Sauder and maybe in print. If you don't feel like being on camera, just make sure that you keep your video feed mute. I would like to acknowledge that the UBC's Vancouver Point Grey campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Musqueam people. We would also like to acknowledge that you're joining us today from many places near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. In the room today, you already know me. My name is Vivian Tran, Manager of Recruitment Admissions for the UBC MBAN program, and I also have my colleagues, Jessica Lee, who's a Senior Manager of Recruitment at UBC Sauder, as well as Anina Noble, who is the Marketing and Communications Co-op student. And Jess and Anina will be in the background answering any questions in the Q&A that don't make it onto the discussion panel. So if you have a question about admissions, for example, or different types of questions related to like how to apply to the program, Jess and Anina are happy to answer those questions in the Q&A. I'd also like to introduce our panelists for this session. So we have Mark Chen, who is the Adjunct Professor of Marketing and Behavioral Science Division at UBC Sauder, and Mark is also an MBA grad from 2017. So thank you, Mark, for joining us. And we also have Nibeer Dewan, who is a manager at E&Y, and Nibeer is a graduate of the UBC MBAN class of 2018, and Leslie Major, who is a math, statistics, and decision analytics instructor at BCIT, and Leslie is an MBAN grad from 2022. We also will have Majid Raja, who is a manager of business development for the business analytics program, joining us a little bit later once we get to the discussion panel. So thank you all our panelists and staff for joining us today for this event and supporting this learning opportunity for everyone that's chosen to join us today. Just a little bit about the agenda. So I'm just going to go through a quick MBAN program overview, and then it's going to be quite quick, and then we will jump directly into the interactive discussion panel, how to upskill your career with analytics. So keep your questions in mind because, you know, I'll start off with some questions myself, but like if you have some questions for the panelists, this is a great opportunity. So keep those in mind and make sure that you put your questions into the Q&A. That helps us track the questions and answer them. And then if you have any technical questions, that can go into the chat. Like if you can't see a feed or you can't hear something, you can put those questions into the chat. So let's get started. Feel free to put the questions in as soon as they come up to you, and we will answer them as we go along. So a little bit about UBC Sauder. We are the #1 business school in Canada. So we have an excellent reputation. When you join UBC Sauder, you're also joining a global community of thought leadership. And that's something that's really exciting because you are getting a tremendous degree in training in business analytics, but you're also getting to join a global community as well, and a well-regarded one at that. We're always ranked within the top 40 universities in the world, and that goes with that whole global thought leadership piece where the institution is a center for research and training and learning. So it is a tremendous community that you're joining into. We do, in terms of UBC Sauder, have 43,000 alumni in around 80 countries around the world. So it is a tremendous business community that you're joining into just from the alumni network of UBC Sauder itself. Of course, the larger university alumni network is about 300,000 alumni in about 150 countries around the world. So it is a tremendous global community that you're going to be joining into. Vancouver is where your studies will take place, and this is a beautiful aerial view that shows you just how beautiful the city is for those of you that aren't from Vancouver. This photo behind me is actually UBC Sauder, and I know it looks otherworldly, but it actually does look like this, you know, on one of our sunny days. For those of you that are worried about like coming to Canada and you have very like, you know, really know what the climate's going to be like, I want to assure you it's not covered in snow here all the time. We actually have 4 seasons, and they are actually quite pleasant. We're going into our spring season right now, so the streets are lined with beautiful cherry blossoms. Again, I can only explain it because I have this, like, I just saw it yesterday, but it does look, again, otherworldly. Like when the cherry blossoms come down, they're almost like pink snow. So that's the kind of snow that we get in Vancouver. If that assuages your fears, we do get 1 or 2 days of snow occasionally, and given how badly we deal with the snow, you'll know that it's not something that we get all the time. The weather is pretty temperate here. If you're familiar with the weather in London, that's London, England, that's kind of what the weather is like in Vancouver. Like rain is our worst season, and we do have 4 seasons. So summers of about 30 degrees here, and then spring and fall, 10 to 20 degrees, depending on your proximity to summertime, and winter is the worst season with more rain than actual snow, and about approximately 0 would be usually as bad as it gets here. So just a little bit of an idea of the climate in Canada, or at least in Vancouver, for those of you that are concerned about that. In terms of the business community in Vancouver, it is a thriving business community. It's one of the most livable cities in the world and in North America, and one of Canada's fastest growing metropolitan economies, with companies like born in Vancouver companies like Lululemon that have since gone global, to powerhouses like McKinsey, Microsoft, and SAP also having operations here in Vancouver. So in terms of the program journey, we do have a 12-month program journey for our UBC MBAN program. You can see for the first 8 months, it's intensive training in various topics in business analytics. So usually 4 classes at the same time. And then I think it was actually Nibeer that said this at an event once. He was like, you basically have to marry and divorce these courses in 5 weeks and then get onto another set of 4 courses. So it is very intensive, but it will prepare you for a career in analytics. As you can see that there is a 4-month analytics consulting project that comes at the end of the program. So you're going to get real world experience. The consulting project is paid. So there is an ROI to doing the consulting project when you're in the MBAN program as well. Now you can see career development programming is prevalent throughout the course of the MBAN degree. So we know that you are joining this program both for the education, but also for the career outcomes. So that's front and center for what we provide to you as well. You will have a professional career coach that you're going to be working with as much as you like, one-on-one. And there's going to be workshops, training programs. You're going to learn about things like how to properly put together a resume, cover letter, but also like salary negotiations. Like that's really key as well. So a lot of training there on the career front as well. And I'm going to ask my colleague, Anina, if you can maybe put the webinar recording of our recent MBAN career outcomes event in the chat for everyone to kind of take a look at. We recently did a big event on MBAN career outcomes with our associate director of MBAN careers. So we made a recording of the webinar. So for those of you that want to look into more detail about our career outcomes from the MBAN program, feel free to take a look at this webinar. So like I said, career outcomes are front and center, both for you, of course, and also for us. So we know that this is something that's going to be very important for you to get out of the MBAN program. So like I said, access to one-on-one career coaching, access to our global alumni network. There's company information sessions with employers and various training programs as well. These are a snapshot of our career outcomes. So I don't have the updated outcomes that have been published yet for the class of 2022, but the outcomes I know from preliminary data are already higher than the year before. So this is a mix of data in terms of class profile from 2022, as well as the outcomes from 2021. And you can see the top industry of our graduates. You know, there's always a mix. The class is relatively small, so a difference of, 3 or 4 candidates going to one industry or the other can make a huge difference in the data because of the small size of the class. But you can see there's a healthy mix of industries, and different industries will take predominance depending on the year. So technology probably won't be one of our major employers for the upcoming year, but like other industries I know, like retail analytics, have gone up. So they just take the place. The thing to remember with analytics, and something you're going to take out of this upcoming discussion panel that we're going to have, is that these skills are universal. And they are very useful in times of uncertainty for companies to navigate kind of economic uncertainties or any kind of uncertainties regarding their supply chain or operations. So the skills are universals. The industry mix can change, but demand for this type of skill set is there's never a shortage of that. So let's move on to the admission requirements. I won't go into this in too much detail. We are wrapping up our recruitment for the August 2023 entry, but this is useful information for those of you, of course, that are planning to submit an application by August, our August 25th deadline, or applying for the year afterwards. So I'm just quickly checking the time. I'm just going to move on. So like, if you have further questions about the admissions requirement, just feel free to ask one of my colleagues in the Q&A. Now there is, for those of you that are applying mostly for next year, the process for a GMAT waiver. You can see the deadline has already passed for this year for those that want to apply for a GMAT waiver. But basically, if you do come from a highly quantitative background, there is a set of criteria that you can meet. It's just on our website. And Nina, if you want, have a chance, maybe put the GMAT waiver information for the MBAN program into the chat for anyone that's interested in taking a look at that. But primarily for people applying for next year, if you want to apply for a waiver, look at these deadlines. They're going to be very similar for next year if you're looking to apply for a GMAT waiver, which means you have to complete a fully complete application by these deadlines with the statement of intent or qualification for the GMAT waiver, and then your application can be assessed for the waiver going forward. Scholarships and awards, we do have a range of them. So they go anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000. There's no separate application required for these scholarships. We automatically assess for eligibility for scholarships, with the offer of admission. So if you get an offer of admission from us, you'll also know whether you got one of the scholarships. Now, important deadlines. You can see that we are now on our final deadline, and that will be April 25th for domestic students. Now, for those of you applying for next year, you'll see that when we publish the new deadlines, they're going to be very similar to this set of deadlines here. So if you're interested in next year, keep these deadlines in mind. We always recommend that you try to apply early. Just so, that way you know what's coming up in the future. You have plenty of time to apply for a study permit if you need one. And it just helps you to fully engage with some of the pre-program prep that we have as well to get you started on the program. Our next event coming up is an Ask Me Anything session. So it's just really an informal session. I try to run these every 1 or 2 weeks. So if there's questions that come up later on, you can feel free to just drop in on this session that we have. So I notice our panelists are here, so I'm just gonna get started with our panel sessions, and I'll just put their profiles up here for everyone. If I can ask all our panelists to kind of unmute their feeds, we can maybe start with some introductions. So whoever's ready can maybe introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what you do and your connection to UBC when you graduated, for example.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So my background in terms of school was in biochemistry. I worked mostly in consulting after I finished school. So if anybody's transitioning from a STEM background and is interested in business or analytics, happy to talk about that. Teaching wasn't part of my plan. So it's not that I wanted to go into teaching. It's more that I specifically wanted to be more involved with this Master of Business Analytics program for 2 reasons. One is that if this program was available when I first started my first job, I think I could have really benefited from it. And 2, all the people that I've hired in my analytics roles kind of have a similar background to what I hoped they would get from this program. So I really want to be involved with this program to teach the students, to give them the kind of skills that I hope people on my team had. And that's why I'm involved.
Thanks so much, Mark. Leslie, I just see your feed under Mark, so can you start?
Okay, yeah. So hi there. My name's Leslie Major. So I teach at BCIT. I've been teaching here for quite a few years, about 18 years. Before that, I had a background actually in fuel cell research, more like math engineering, applied computational math. And I didn't plan on teaching either, but I somehow ended up in the business school at BCIT here and kept going. And we started teaching more and more analytics. And that's where I started learning as much as I could on my own. But the program last year really helped me really very quickly increase my knowledge and interact with everybody else. With the math background, what I really appreciated was that extra analytics kind of background to go with it to help me here at BCIT. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
And Nibeer.
Yeah, sure. I'm Nibeer Dewan. I'm currently a manager at Ernst & Young in Seattle, US. I was part of the first cohort for MBAN in 2018, and I have experience in healthcare, recently consulting for the past 2-3 years in consulting, mainly in public sector consulting in the US, and then also in technology in Canada. So that's been my background. My undergrad was in operations research engineering. So I had a little bit of understanding of statistics, but the analytics program introduced me to the world of coding and understanding that piece of it. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us. And I would note, a lot of people would know Seattle. So just so you guys know, for the participants out there, Seattle's only about 2-hour drive from Vancouver. Yeah. So that's why Vancouver forms part of that West Coast tech hub, as well as cities like Seattle. Yeah, also very similar weather. So it doesn't not like whatever weather Seattle has, Vancouver has the similar weather. Just again, for those of you that are from other countries and are quite worried about the weather, Vancouver, actually, I would say the easiest weather to compare to would be Seattle. Great, thanks for the introduction, Nibeer. And finally, Majid, can you give your introduction?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Majid Raja. I'm currently wearing multiple hats at UBC. I'm a manager of business development and also a corporate advisor or partner advisor, where I work with our industry and community partner organizations on identifying different ways in which business analytics, data science, and quantitative skill sets can help solve problems. And I'm, hearing about everyone else's introduction. Great to see you all again, folks. But I learned something new about each of you, and I think I have a lot in common with you in terms of having taught in past. I've been teaching at different universities for past 10 years as well. And I come from management consulting background. 10 years prior to coming into academia, I worked in management consulting in different countries. And prior to that, I studied operational research back in the day. I'm not going to say the year, a very long time ago. And what I've seen over time is those back in the day when there were a lot of graduate operational research programs at different universities, most of those universities have now sort of transitioned into more business analytics focused program. In fact, MBAN at UBC is also a successor to a previous program, Master of Management in Operational Research. And that makes total sense to me, because what I've seen in the industry, the way the market needs have changed and the way the talent pipelines have evolved, we need more and more business analytics folks in the market coming out of that typical optimization and mathematical modeling work into more applied data analysis. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, Majid,
that's my background.
Thank you so much. That actually touches on a point on one of the questions I kind of want to start off with. I can already see some, like for the participants, thank you so much for already putting some questions in the Q&A. I would like to start the panel off with like a broad question. I think it's on a lot of people's minds, but what do you think is the role of analytics or building analytics skills in today's kind of turbulent economic times? What are your thoughts on that, like the role of analytics and whether it's an area of growth or opportunity in such kind of turbulent economic times that we're experiencing at the moment?
This is such a big question, big in the sense that it's hard to really condense it all in one brief setting or session, let alone in a few sentences. But I would say a couple of indicators that I can point out to are that despite the market conditions that we're seeing in North America, rest of the world as well, LinkedIn published a report a few months ago, I think back in January, about the fastest growing jobs in Canada, which is kind of reflective of what's in rest of North America as well. And out of top 20 jobs in Canada, high growth jobs in Canada, 14 had a business analytics related component to that. So those could be your business analysts, those could be your data modelers, those could be your ETL developers, marketing analytics, risk modelers. All of these kind of roles they need business analytics skills, and they're on the growth trajectory. And over the years, my 20 years of career, I think I've been doing this on a lot, that business analytics is a kind of skill set, which is, it's a weird paradox. It's like it's a niche skill set, very specific set of skills, which is like a Swiss Army knife with a wide or broad applications in so many areas. And I see this in my day-to-day job in interacting with the community. We have partners from government, from health sector, from consulting, banking, military, law enforcement, non-government organizations, environment, climate, you name it. And we have those employers trying to get their hands on business analytics talent because there's so much skill shortage in the market.
Amazing. Yes, I think a lot of people are concerned because they oftentimes I feel like there's this conception that it's like data analytics or business analytics are tied to the tech sector, for example. And with the downturn in the tech sector, there's a lot of fear that, like what happens to business analytics. But that is a really good point, that these skills are universal. And if there's a downturn in tech, that just means the talent gets absorbed in the other sectors that have been trying to get this type of talent. So that is a really good point to bring up. Does anyone else have some thoughts to share on this?
Yeah, for me, I don't think it has changed all that much. I think the main difference is that 15 years ago, a lot of companies can get away with just paying lip service in saying that they care about analytics. Whereas now, since most companies do have analysts and apply data analytics to their day-to-day operations, it's a lot harder to get away with that. It's become more of an arm race that every company needs somebody that can at least look at their data and share the insights from it. So I think the main difference may be just that, for example, in the retail space that I worked in the last few years, with Amazon being such a major competitor, every company feels that they need to be able to make data-driven decisions in order to run their company and to decide how they're going to deploy their limited marketing budget, to decide how they're going to manage their inventory and how to run their stores and day-to-day operations. So there's just a lot more recognition that this is the way that businesses need to be run, rather than just going by past experiences or empirical information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good point. I don't think anyone could ignore the importance of data or set back in terms of doing really engaging in data-driven decision making when everybody else is doing the same thing and making decisions based on data.
And in addition, I would like to say, learning about analytics doesn't have to be that you have to be a business analyst or a data analyst, right? It's like learning how to email right now. Everybody emails. So it's having that understanding of a quantitative understanding uncertainty. When you're making business decisions or help others make business decisions, if you have the facts and figures and that mindset behind it, that's very well received in any industry. And some of the odd ones that I've been part of is manufacturing, for example. Healthcare is a big it's behind in many ways, especially in government, and Canada being more universal healthcare. There's a lot of government healthcare interest in Canada. In the US, there's more in the payer side, in the private payer side, but everybody's wanting to understand their populations. The pandemic has given a tremendous boost of federal funding. So those industries are booming in terms of analytics skills and all of that. So I think regardless of the role or title that are generally or historically associated with somebody who has an analytics background, I think even if you're not in that role, or if you're wanting to go back to the role you're currently in, you can use these skill sets, these mindsets to improve your career.
Awesome. Thank you, Nibeer.
For sure. I agree with that too. Quite a few colleagues from my cohort from last year are now in like one of the handful of coastal health or the other ones, and working in analytics for them right now too.
Yeah. And I think what happened is, like, with the downturn in tech, now like this talent is not just absorbed by one industry, right? They were paying so much and the sector was growing so much. Now that it's gone a little bit of a downturn, there's a bit more variety in where the grads are going to, just because now the other industries actually stand a chance to hire all this talent. So it's been interesting to see the mix of different industries that grads have been going to in the wake of the downturns in the tech sector. So let's start taking some questions from the audience. So participants, thank you so much for putting your questions in the Q&A. There's a question here. For those of you that did the MBAN program, what is a surprising skill or opportunity you found from the MBAN program? Anything you went in with, like Nibeer and Leslie, that you were a bit surprised at what you learned, or like something that you didn't expect about the program that you came out with?
Yeah, I can share something. So before I came to the MBAN program, I did not have any background in tech. So I don't have a computer science degree or any of that. I had more of an engineering degree, but I did not know how to code. And so one of the surprising skills was that even though in this particular program you learn R and Python and the languages that are more associated with data analysis, you build a mindset around understanding how logic works. And so when I got a job as a product manager at a tech company, they were not using Python or R. They were using Java or .NET or whatever developers use. But I was able to understand what they were talking about from a technical standpoint as a product manager of that product. And so that was more surprising, that, it's that understanding of how logic and coding and all of these apps and systems work. You'll get an understanding of it, even though you are specifically learning about how to use that for analytical problem solving. So that was mine.
Amazing. So you really learned the language of engagement in terms of analytics, and that's huge. It's basically becoming fluent in something in the language of data. Leslie, any takeaways that you had that you didn't expect going into the program?
Well, many. Absolutely. I think, kind of on the technical aspect of things, just I teach quite a bit of time series forecasting, and there's time series everywhere, so many data sets. So having a really deep understanding of that concept, I learned so much that I didn't even realize I didn't understand. And actually, because I've taught quite a bit in the subject, I really learned so much more. I got such a deeper understanding in all the and the courses themselves. One of the kind of unexpected fun takeaways too, we did a hackathon near the end of the year, and something that I kind of discovered, this sounds super nerdy, but it was learning kind of how to get the data to speak to you. Sometimes there's some hidden gems hidden in there, and when you find them, it's so exciting. So I think that was just a fun one. It's like, it sounds so nerdy, but getting the data to kind of talk to you, you're like, okay, I see what's happening here and here. Anyways, that was probably one of my biggest takeaways. Now when I get a data set, I'm so excited just to go explore it.
That is so cool. And a lot of the program is also like learning how to tell a story with the data, right? Like, because you're basically translating this data for key decision makers. I think this is one of the big takeaways from the program, and Mark would know a lot more about this as well, is just not only learning how to analyze the data and interpreting the data, but also telling a story to the C-suite, for example, and basically making decisions like enterprise level decisions for, based on data. So being able to tell a story with the data as well as to figure out what the data is telling you is a big part of, of what you get out of the MBAN program. I think that's one of the big distinguishing factors too. The more I learn about the program, I'm learning more every year, is like, it's not just data. It's almost like there's as much as like a mini MBA squashed into this program as much as it is a program about data analytics. Like people are learning a lot about the business side of things and how to tell like a story that's relevant to decision making in enterprises. So that is really cool. Thank you all for sharing on that. There's a bunch of questions that are coming up that are quite interesting. One I'd like to bring up just for all of you, anyone that has thoughts on this, is how do you see the field of business analytics evolving in the next few years? And what do you think hopeful candidates should do to prepare for the future?
Yeah, I've been waiting for someone to ask that. We've been working as part of the data analytics group in Ernst & Young on the US side, and there's a global POV also. Everybody's working on what's the take with ChatGPT and all of these. Let me share an anecdote from my last class of the last day of MBAN. Our last class ended with Dr. Harish, who was one of MBAN's leading professors. He brought up a tool then. It was called Big ML. It's still there. And he basically said, all that you guys learned in the last 9 months, you can do through here automatically. And we were like, oh my gosh, we spent all of those hours figuring out the syntax and the code. Why are you telling us this right now? So reflecting on that joke, 4 years later, what I realized was those automations, yes, will definitely impact how we approach. We may not spend hours doing a model anymore because somebody's generating syntax for us. But I think what we are learning is that the interpretability of those results, how it applies to you, what to use, when to use, those are all on human judgment. And so the way analytics tools and technologies are being used and will be used will definitely change. We are seeing it right now. But I think what we are coming to realize as we are using these things is that those key fundamentals, which you will learn, that mindset, that questioning, that delivery, the storytelling, those things will always remain. So I think the way to approach this is, yes, you still have to spend your hours on R because otherwise you will know what the machine is generating. But yeah, that's my take on it. I think there's a deeper layer underneath all of these things that cannot be necessarily replaced by AI or ChatGPT type models.
Anyone else have some thought about this, like how the field will evolve, or especially in the age of AI and ChatGPT?
I think from what I've seen, there's also a lot of need for the less technical side. When I first started teaching, I interviewed a lot of employers, companies that hire students from this particular program, and a lot of them emphasizes that the students, what they would really like to see is somebody who can not only just do the analytics, but also be able to communicate it to executive level audiences. And what I think is that the trend is that there's just a lot of people who know business and a lot of people who know how to code, but not as many people who can speak both languages and do both. Right? I mean, I don't want to disparage anybody who might be considering the MBA program, since I went through that program myself and I feel like I got a lot out of it. But UBC graduates about 250 MBAs each year. There's about 6 or 7 other MBA programs in BC and many more on the East Coast. When I used to do recruiting for Boston Consulting Group, group, I would go to an event with Rahman and there'd be like 300 MBAs right there. So it's very easy for me to find somebody with just a business background. And likewise, it's in my hiring, it's also pretty easy to find somebody with just a technical background. I can hire people with a software engineering background, a math or statistics background, economics background, or a data science background. All these programs come up with a lot of people with good technical skills. But it's a lot harder to find somebody who can do both. And that's part of the reason why I think this program is useful, is that it not only gives you enough technical background so that you can do your analysis, but also know enough about the business so that you can communicate the actual insights and the results and persuade people in the company why your recommendations and your model or your dashboard would be useful for them.
Absolutely.
Quickly add something to that, Vivian. I think that everything that Nibeer and Mark said about what business analytics is going to look like, or what it actually values in terms of what we take out of this current skill set is totally makes sense to me. And I say that because it's my business to engage with the market and the industry and to keep an eye on what's going to happen in future, trying to make those forecasts. And my partners in consulting firms like EY and Nibeer and other folks like that, they do a lot of research on this, or future of work as well, and try to absorb from it. What I've learned is that all of these business skill sets, along with your analytics skill sets, are important. Your ability to translate is important, both those things said. Another thing that is extremely important is to sort of know where the industry is going. There's a lot of catching up to be done in the industry, where there are companies which are doing very advanced level work with artificial intelligence, generative AI, and so on. There are also many companies who are just barely catching up with what they can do with their data. One of the biggest engines in any economy is the government. Canada has massive government, provincial, municipal, as well as federal level. Government has a lot of catching up to do. There will always be these organizations which are just starting off on their journey of visualizing or having a vision of what can data do for them, what problems they can solve with data, and so on. And that is not necessarily going to be someone who comes in with some very technical skill set. That is going to be someone who has a bigger picture view of the things, and they can come in and they say, oh, by the way, this business problem, this operational problem, this social problem is something we can solve with data. And this is how I'm going to talk to our super technical folks. And this is how I'm going to lead that lead that effort and take us to the next level. And one more thing I would like to say, I always like to go back to the basics of business. What is business analytics? It's made up of 4 components. It's descriptive analytics, which is setting your data up and describing what is out there. What do things look like? It's predictive analytics, where you actually, before predictive, often the diagnostic stage comes in. Diagnostic analytics is where you try to analyze what is happening. Why is data that is appearing, why is it appearing like that? Is there some sort of relationship between multiple variables? And then you do predictive analytics, where you try to make a forecast of what will happen in future based on what you've learned so far. But at the top of it all, or in some ways at very fundamental level, that the thing that you're trying to do is prescriptive analytics. That is where you're trying to prescribe solutions based on what you've learned. You're trying to make decisions. It always boils down to that. And that decision making is primarily a business or management skill, so to speak.
Yes.
So that kind of comprehensive view is always going to be helpful.
Yes, and Majid, just because I think you kind of answered one of the questions that was already in the chat, I'll just bring it up. It's the person would like to learn what's the advantage or disadvantage of being like a business analyst compared to a data analyst. What's kind of skill sets are critically required for both in a real business and data world, from your perspective. So I think that is like, if I'm interpreting what you said right, like, like that business side is really getting to like this prescriptive part where you can actually describe solutions rather than just kind of analyzing the data. Am I getting that right? Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I think Nibeer may be able to shed a lot of light on that, because I believe consulting firms deal with that kind of questions or roles quite a lot. I'll just say one thing before I pass it on to anyone. You know what? Market has not reached a consensus on what are we going to call these different roles within the realm of business analytics. What one company in one country may be calling a business analyst is not necessarily the same job on a day-to-day basis in another company, even within the same economy or a different economy. So I would always take these job titles with a pinch of salt. Business analyst could mean so many different things, depending on whether you're working in tech sector, finance, retail, or so many other areas. But having said that, yes, generally speaking, business analyst, there's a very clear expectation that business analyst is going to be someone who can speak both languages, is the interpreter. But not only that, is also able to support decisions. And as you grow in that career, you become product manager and so on. Would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, and the main thing is, I think it's the perspective that you're looking at it for. So from data scientists, I know UBC has one. That was one of the programs I was looking into when I was trying to understand which one to pick. But I think I chose MBAN because I felt like going through the MBAN program would give me, because I already had an engineering background, would give me some more business understanding on how to apply math, stat, and tech into business decision making versus the other way around. And I felt like, and it turned out to be true, the MBAN program is like a broad swing at everything that you can use to make decisions in business. And then if you so chose to learn one thing, like Majid was saying, like prescriptive or descriptive, then you can always go in and learn more about that. So I wanted to understand all the different methods and the mindsets that exist in analytics, so that regardless of which industry I got a job in or what role I got a job in, I could use that in the future. So I think that's the key difference versus a data scientist. You know that you will be doing hardcore coding as a data scientist and making a lot of these models and a lot of these sophisticated and advanced models that are existing out there.
Yeah, I agree too. I guess applying all of this to business was so useful last year. Like we got all sorts of real world data sets. And thinking back to the first question of kind of like takeaways, one of them I found fascinating was just like ever so slight transforms of the data. Let's say for customer analytics, if you have recency, so you take the date, and just these slight transforms would take a variable and make it so much more powerful as a predictor that if you're purely on the data analyst end, you might not see. And then you get to drop in and it's almost like, yeah, you get to see all these different applications in business, get these real world data sets and get to try them and present your findings and everything else. So you really get to touch on all these different places that analytics is used in business. But then again, go talk about, well, what does that mean to the stakeholders? Yes, we can find these findings, but let's go take them the next level and make decisions and draw conclusions off of them for the stakeholders. So yeah, that was really powerful and really useful. Again, I'm also from a math background, and engineering. So yeah, I didn't anticipate how much I would learn in all these fields with all of these kind of hands-on data sets we got to touch on.
That's really interesting. And actually, that's a really good like jumping off point. So there's something I want to wade into because we touched on it earlier, but there's a few questions in here about like how will this field evolve in the age of AI? And with all these discussions where like you have to be broader, you have to understand your stakeholders, you also have to understand the language of it, but like, like some of the stuff that's being done, like with the coding and that kind of thing, like it might be taken over in the age of AI. Where does this field fall then with increasing automation? Like, anybody have any thoughts on like how this field will evolve with, the incoming age of AI and ChatGPT taking over adding some automations to this aspect of the field? I know it's a big question, but I can see like a few questions in here and it's on top of a lot of people's minds. Any thoughts from the panel?
Happy to get us started again on this. I'd love to hear, Mark, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well, if you like. I think that there's a lot of discussion going on what AI is going to do, and is it going to take people's jobs away, and what kind of jobs are going to go away. I remember these kind of conversations happening back in the day when, even when internet or email became regular part of our business life. And yeah, I'm kind of that old. But you know what? In end of the day, it's a tool. AI is a tool, is a human-made set of tools. You're gonna have to know how to use it in one way or the other. It has application in pretty much every job. Maybe AI will necessarily not take your job away, but someone who knows how to use AI smartly, not in a lousy way that we're seeing a number of those examples these days. If you use AI smartly, that person can take your job, right? Someone who can use AI to their advantage. And this goes back to the whole theme that I'm noticing in this conversation, hearing Leslie and Nibeer and Mark, is that the human side of it, making sense of things, using all of these tools to make decisions, support decisions, understanding the needs, defining the problems, etc. These are the kind of things which will always be relevant. Yes, you could ask a generative AI tool to write a code for you, but what will you even ask? And again, what will you produce out of it? What's the value that you're going to generate? How are you going to present it to your customer? So these are. I think it will just make the job of a business analytics professional more exciting, but there's nothing to worry about there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyone else have some thoughts to add to that? It's really good insights, Majid. Thank you so much.
I know we've been wrestling with that here too. Definitely been a hot topic. I know one of my colleagues who works now in healthcare from the MBAN from last year as well. He uses it actually just to speed up his coding when he's doing his work as well. It's awesome. I can definitely say, talking to different people, certainly AI could help you potentially overfit to your data sets, right? And that's where a bunch of people I've talked to have these amazing overfitted models, for example, to your data, but you're missing talking to all the industry experts who are saying, well, actually that data was just collected from this time to this time, or with these constraints. There's still all that human aspect to everything, or even knowing which method to use when really kind of is a contextual thing that if you don't tell, let's say, whatever program it is, that's also happening, you don't know to go look for that, you don't know to specify that, then you're going to possibly produce a predictive model that's not worth anything. And what's your training data set? What are the biases? So there's so much human kind of like you have to know which method to use. One, you can throw AI at it after that, but was that the right method? Was there another one? What about your data set? Is it biased? Is it complete? So there's so much more human element to everything to fold over top of it and then just use it to speed up your job, really.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Those are great points, Leslie. It just reminds me of the first time when I was like a kid a long time ago, and they're like with calculators, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't know the right question to ask, if you don't set it up right, like if you don't add that human element where you've talked to the stakeholders and you realize what your needs are, like there's so much to asking that right question in order to leverage AI. Like AI, I think, can be easily leveraged to like make things that it can do well, faster and more efficient, but there's always like that human driver there that has to ask the question. It has to be the right question to make it an effective tool for a company. It doesn't just operate by itself, right? Like I think that's the thing that even as a layperson that I would say it doesn't operate by itself. It needs a human driver. And even if you have the wrong human driver, it doesn't work, right? Like you need to understand the language, you need to understand the context, the problems, the stakeholders, and the constraints.
Completely.
Yeah. Thanks so much, guys. It's such an interesting conversation. Mark, do you have anything to add to this?
Maybe just to reemphasize the point that Majid and Leslie made is that a large part of doing good analytics is recognizing when to use what tool. So I don't think AI is that new. I mean, 15 years ago, the analytics that my company was doing, we call that machine learning and AI as well. I think one of the things to recognize in terms of deciding what is the right tool is who is the end user of the results of that model that you're producing? Is it a human or is it a machine? So on the machine side, let's say if you're working at Amazon and you need to come up with a product recommendation engine, when somebody buys a product, you recommend additional products that they might be interested in. That is a case where you're producing a model where the results are used by machines. So in this case, you probably you want to leverage the latest, most sophisticated technology and tools that you can to come up with the best model. Because even if you make a 0.1% improvement on the current model, that's going to be millions of dollars for your company. Right? Mm-hmm. And you don't necessarily need to, you use like A/B testing and other tools to test how well the model is working, but you don't actually need to explain exactly how the AI is generating the recommendations. You just evaluate the results that come out of it. Is it actually getting more people to buy the products that you're recommending? Mm-hmm. What I try to focus on is on the other side, where the results are used by humans. So it's a little, maybe for lack of a better word, maybe it's like a little bit lower tech. A lot of times, depending on the person that you need to explain it to, like an executive who doesn't have a business analytics background, you may not want to use the most sophisticated tool or a black box like machine learning. You want to use something that they can actually understand, that they feel comfortable with, that they trust, so that they would actually take the recommendations and go along with it. So again, going back to that point about just recognizing when is the right time to use what tool. It may not always be appropriate to use the latest, flashiest, cutting edge AI tools, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and who the audience is, and also, like I said, what the data set looks like. You don't want to have garbage in, garbage out if data isn't robust enough to support a really sophisticated model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I did an internship with the government this summer, and just passing off my work later, like they have in-house certain software you can have on your laptop as well. And there's certain skill sets that they have. So if you go too deep into anything, well, nobody can use it later. So you try to get some more high level insights and methods to pass off to them that somebody there can use later. They're not data analysts by trade. They're more kind of on the business decision end of things.
Very interesting. Yeah, I guess it's always important to remember that even in the age of, machines and AI, like humans are generally the consumers of everything we produce and all the services we provide. So it's always important to keep that human aspect there. Humans know humans probably better than machines. So yeah, it's always important to remember those things when we're using kind of in this age of AI where we're using machine learning. It's a logical kind of thing, but there's a lot of other factors that that takes person to input to make everything work. So Very interesting discussion. Thank you, everyone. I guess this question I would say is directed more at Nibeer. What kind of questions came up when employers saw your MBAN and technical qualifications? How did the program prepare you for your current role?
So my first role out of the program was as a product manager at a Vancouver-based tech company, actually. And so I guess the main thing at that time that came out was there was, as Majid was saying, there's a lot of product managers in tech, and specifically speaking of that role, that come from either a consulting or an MBA background or a developer technical background. And so then having this middle background where I'm understanding some code, some data, and then some business was very interesting to employers looking at hiring product managers. Specifically, this is 2018. Specifically, they were looking for people with an understanding of data. And so that's why when they saw somebody coming out of, and at that time, Vancouver, this program was very new. It was the first year. So I had to explain what the program did. And that caught a lot of people's attention in that aspect. They were mainly looking for understanding how you can distill information quickly to make product-based decisions that were not being done at that company at that time. So, and then if I just may add, in consulting, people were more familiar with this kind of a role and a background. And I think the background that I had in terms of prescriptive analytics, which is a course, two courses in MBAN. The simulation aspect was very, very novel. Not a lot of people know how to do that. And it's a lot of application in improving processes in industry. So
awesome.
That helped.
Thank you, Nibeer. Wonderful. So we're just coming towards the end of our time with our panelists here. So I want to be cognizant of that and just maybe just ask one broad question to leave us off with. You guys all come from different viewpoints when it comes to the MBAN program. Mark, you're a professor in the MBAN program. Majid, you work in business development for the program and you know the industry really well. And Nibeer and Leslie, you're alumni. So you all have these different viewpoints. I would love to see if you can give one piece of advice to our audience today who are considering studying analytics or considering taking on the MBAN program. What's your piece of advice? What's your food for thought for everyone to think about as a takeaway from whether you take the plunge and do additional training in the field of analytics? Anybody can start.
Come on, is it me again?
Yes, Majid.
Okay. All right. My quick thought would be, and actually it's kind of reflective of some really smart questions I see in Q&A bar there. It's relevant to that as well. I would suggest that you keep your eyes open, be aware of what's happening in the industry, and try to think of kind of the problems that you would like to solve if you had business analytics skill set. And it will certainly start opening so many doors for you. Of course, you may not have perfect answers before you start or complete the program, but you will set yourself in sort of that sort of mindset. And then someone mentioned those self-learning courses. Yes, it will help if you go online on Coursera or edX or even YouTube or LinkedIn Learning to do a bit of basic level programming. You don't have to be an expert to come into the program as far as I understand in terms of admission requirements, because this program is super diverse. People from business and technical background, they come all together and feed off of each other in areas where they need more skills. You'll be okay, but if you have a little bit of basic understanding of programming, it will go a long way. You'll just have a head start in the first place. That's all.
Absolutely. I would second that, Majid. Like for anybody that's considering the program and maybe not super familiar with analytics, take go ahead and do like an intro to R or Python course, like on Coursera, for example, and learn a little bit more about the topic, learn a bit about the language, and get yourself familiar with it. We don't require it, but it's always an asset to have at least a little bit of that understanding before you start the program. Anybody else wants to leave with their food for thought for the participants?
My free advice is take the plunge, go forward and do it. It was an amazing, life-changing year, I would say. It was awesome being in a cohort in person, all together, growing together, group work together. You're there at midnight and you kind of get to that silly stage where you're exhausted and you're bonding. Kind of at my age, I didn't think I'd make like 60 new friends. It was amazing. And I learned so much, and you grow so much by doing it all together as a cohort. So if you're thinking about the program, I say take the plunge, definitely do it. It's an amazing program.
I totally second that. I think that's one of the biggest lifetime key takeaways, because 5 years later, you're going to forget all the courses anyways, but you will remember all of those people and all of those networks that you have had worldwide. And I think that's a big takeaway for differentiating between a Coursera where you're learning by yourself and then investing time and money into a program like this, especially for people who are working currently. If you're wanting to leave your job, tremendous opportunity cost, but it pans out very, very well over time. So
yeah, and that network is amazing. I'm already leaning on it, sending some of my students their way, asking questions. We all saw each other this weekend, a whole bunch of us. It's an amazing network that you're going to lean on in your career in all aspects. You're going to hire people from it. You're going to get hired from it, that you just don't get virtually. You get it really by being in person for a full year together.
Maybe one last thing I'll add, and this is kind of extrapolating from my experiences as a student in the MBA program. I think from my classmates and I, the ones that are more satisfied with their experience at Sauder are the ones that came in with the goal of just learning rather than goal of getting the degree. I think like getting that degree will get, like, having Sauder on your resume is really good. It'll get you the job interview, but once you show up at the job interview, you're still competing against a bunch of other people who are probably equally qualified as you. So during the interview, that's where you still need to communicate your enthusiasm, your love for analytics, and why you can do this job. So I think getting a degree, whether it's the MBAN or any other program, it's fairly easy. You can do the minimal amount of work and kind of coast through, and you'll have that on your resume. But what you really get out of it is if your goal is to learn. If you spend like when I was going through the MBA program, I was spending all my weekends doing hackathons and competitions. I was taking extra courses, speaking to all the professors after class, and I feel like that's what made it so that I got a lot more out of the program.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Mark. And like to that point, like, yes, there's absolutely a lot of these courses you can do online, but this community that you build in the program, that's going to help you weather a lot of storms in the future. We don't know what the future holds, but these relationships you have with basically your new family, when you join a program like this, you're building a second family, basically, and they're going to help support you through these thicks and thins. There are people that if you had questions that you're about your career or about the future of what something looks like or a job opportunity somewhere, you would be able to get the straight goods from people that are basically your friends that you've made in the program. So thank you so much to all of you for really highlighting, the importance of these relationships, and that, you can't really, it's not the first thing people think of, but it's so important to have that kind of support network. So I'm really glad that you guys brought this up because I think that's a huge thing that you get out of the program. Yes, the program's amazing. Yes, you learn a lot, but these relationships you build, in something like the MBAN program, is unquantifiable. Really, I think it's exponential. Let's call it that. Everyone put some number to it. I would say it's exponential. So thank you so much for sharing today and for taking time out of your really busy schedules to join us for this discussion event. I think I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else here has as well. So thanks again for your time. And I'll stay on for a few minutes just for the audience members in case they had a few other questions. But panelists, if you need to get through for your day, feel free to leave for your busy schedules ahead. And thank you again so much for for joining us today and always for being such great contributing members of the Sauder family.